In addition to the first-line defenses, the innate immune system also includes some sensor systems. So in this metaphor, these are basically the security cameras monitoring for invaders, and so they make up kind of the second major component of the innate immune system. And so once a pathogen has crossed the first line, so they've gotten through the physical and chemical barriers, and they're now inside the body, the immune system depends on these sensor systems to detect this and kind of raise the alarm so that they can be controlled through other mechanisms within the immune system. And so one of the main ways this is done is through the use of these microbe-associated molecular patterns, or MAMPs. Sometimes these are instead called pathogen-associated molecular patterns, but we've kind of shifted away from that terminology because they can be found on non-pathogens as well. Basically, these are conserved structures that are not present in hosts, and they basically signal to the host cells, the immune response cells, that something is a foreign object. So this can be things like peptidoglycan, flagellin, lipotecoic acids, or double-stranded RNA in the case of some viruses. So basically just things that don't belong whatsoever in the human body, but can be detected. And so the way that these MAMPs or PAMPs are detected is through these compounds called pattern recognition receptors. And so these allow cells, some specific cells, to see the signs of a microbial invasion. So once you detect a MAMP through this PRR, pattern recognition receptor, you can produce compounds that kind of raise the alert for other responders to come take action. So this can be in the form of cytokines, which trigger additional immune response cells, or vasoactive factors, which alter the blood pressure, allowing more cells to kind of rush to the aid in that location. And so two common examples of the pattern recognition receptors are the toll-like receptors and the nod-like receptors. And the toll-like receptors are just the specific class of these pattern recognition receptors that function exclusively in the plasma membrane. So they'll recognize unique PAMPs or MAMPs of different viruses, bacteria, or fungi, and send a signal to the inside of the cell. So these will be attached in the plasma membrane. That's what this is representing down here. Imagine this is the plasma membrane. They detect the presence of any one of these compounds depending on which type of toll-like receptor you have, and it triggers the release of signal molecules inside the immune cell. So this is kind of like a sensor kinase system where it's on the outside of the cell and it signals for behaviors to change inside the cell. So in contrast, there's also the nod-like receptors. And so these are located inside of the cell for detecting intracellular pathogens. So rather than responding based on the plasma membrane, this is going to be able to detect pathogens that have actually entered into the cell. And so they're in the cytoplasm in this compound called the inflammasome. And so what they'll do is basically trigger inflammation and the adaptive immune cells to respond and deal with that invading pathogen. Alright, so now that the invader is detected, it wouldn't do a lot of good to detect it if you didn't have some sort of system to raise the alarm. And one of the main ways that cells will do this is by releasing cytokines. So these are just these soluble proteins or glycoproteins that act as intercellular mediators for signaling purposes. So basically they can be secreted outside of the cell that's producing them to raise the alarm for other cells to respond. And so one very important class of these that's highlighted a lot are the interferons. And so these will actually directly interfere with viral replication, playing a huge role in the response to viral pathogens. And now that the alarm has been raised, it's basically up to the effector actions to deal with the intruders or the pathogens.